So, first question then, so why did you want to become a trustee?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to just become a volunteer. So I wanted to stay engaged with the YMCA.
Yep.
And I'm actually happy that ended up that took a form as a trustee, because it kind of I definitely don't have the same skill set as other trustees, but it gives me an opportunity to share the things that I've picked up over the years, and kind of gives me a completely different view of what a YMCA looks like. So it's quite a bit of a challenge as well for me. So I didn't go into the process thinking I want to become a trustee. I came into it kind of thinking I love the YMCA, and I've lost kind of my one YMCA, and I'm trying to find a new home. And that home kind of came with the opportunity to become a trustee. So I'm thankful that that's the form it took. But happy to kind of working with the YMCA and still engaged with the YMCA, doing what I can anyway.
So it's interesting actually. So my next question then runs around. So people will have a very sort of a particular view of what a trustee looks like, or kind of what sector of society is.
Yeah.
What would you say to that, given what you just said now?
Yeah, so I mean, similarly, I had the same view, and in terms of when I think of trustees and governance, these are quite heavy words.
Yeah.
But I think what I've quickly learned is in terms of the value that anyone can bring to as a trustee is kind of your perspective, your experiences, your upbringing. All of those things are actually really important, because as much as someone can have kind of financial experience or experience in legal and other aspects and expertise, kind of just that kind of diversity of thought is just as important, because what you don't want is everyone from the same background and who think the same way, because then they can't spot when something isn't quite right, or don't see things from other people's perspective. So what I've definitely seen is kind of it's not so much about how much you know about governance or your experience as a trustee in the past, but actually just what you can bring to the table in terms of your perspective, and your view of the world. That's just as valuable.
Fantastic. So
Basically.
it's the lived experience thing as well, in terms of this is my knowledge,
Exactly.
this is what I get. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, absolutely. So do you think the most rewarding aspects of being a trustee, as well as the most challenging?
I'll start with challenging.
Yeah.
uh,
Glass half empty.
yeah. I think probably the most challenging thing is just kind of if you haven't been a trustee before, it's just probably just getting it's a very different perspective of an organization than you would have had as an employee or as a volunteer.
Yeah.
It's a lot more comprehensive. It's a much larger scope of things that you need to kind of have an understanding of or a view of. Instead of kind of, I work in housing and I know a little bit about housing, it's kind of looking at the much bigger picture and a much higher level, and actually not getting drawn into the details of things or kind of getting tactical about stuff, which is quite tempting for almost everyone to do. So I think that's so the learning curve of kind of seeing everything and then not getting too stuck into one thing and maintaining that kind of stepping back kind of view, is quite challenging at first, and I think it takes some time to kind of get used to. And I think it's even just finding a voice and feeling confident to say something. I think that can be quite challenging as you kind of first become a trustee. And I think just have to just make very difficult decisions, and you come across very difficult things. You don't necessarily see all the nice things. It's kind of the most challenging things come to you. So I think that's something that people might not be actually quite used to. And then in terms of the ward, I think it's just seeing nice things in the board papers. So seeing the stories of what we're doing, what our staff are doing. I think it's really inspirational, and I think that's extremely rewarding just to see kind of the impact that we're having. And it's not necessarily because of board decisions, but just as an organization, it's good to see those kind of how we're doing and how much impact we're having, really.
Do you think, Sue, just a side question really, in terms of you and your day job and sort of what you do you think some of the things that you pick up being a trustee then help you or translate into the way you approach your day job as well, or are they completely distinct?
Massively. I think, from my perspective, I think in terms of kind of people talk a lot about strategy and being strategic,
Yeah.
and I think that's probably one, in terms of being a trustee, that's probably the the thing that I've taken the most into my own role in terms of understanding. So when I see a decision being made by management, I don't instantly think, oh, that's a really bad decision. Why are they doing that? I kind of appreciate that they're probably managing multiple priorities. When I'm doing something, I think, what is the long-term impact of this? And I try to consider, because I have that broader view. I see the broader view as a trustee of, we have to weigh these things with these things to make it work, and we have to make some tough decisions. So I think seeing that as a trustee has really helped me in my role and actually made me a bit more strategic. And I've taken a much larger role in kind of strategic planning in my own company, just because I get that experience of how to bring together a strategic plan, how to think about risk, and all of those things. And I think even if you're not an expert, just understanding and seeing those things play out help you kind of build a picture of what an organization looked like from start to finish, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. That's really good. I'm glad, on a personal level, I'm really glad, but also know that kind of you've added a valuable contribution in terms of your questions and your challenge from your perspective. I think it's been really sort of helpful as we've kind of gone through different stages. So, going back to one of your sort of first things you said, which is about sort of you wanted to stay involved in the YMCA. So why did you first get involved in the YMCA? What was your introduction?
So it was a bit of a strange one. I was at university and I ran so I've always volunteered. It's always been something I've always done. So even when I was at secondary school, I did lots of volunteering. We did trips. I taught kids kind of maths and English, and kind of set up an after school club. So I've always been volunteering, and at university, I run the kind of the basketball club at the university, and I wanted to do some kind of community work. So I reached out to a guy called Scott Neely, who at the time was running kind of a sports program in Coventry, and I said, look, I'm happy to come and volunteer, and I'll bring some of our players and some of our kind of members to come and volunteer coaching kind of basketball. And then Scott's organization merged with the YMCA. So one day I kind of turned up and it wasn't Scott anymore. It wasn't called what it was called before, and it was now a YMCA. So that's kind of how it kind of started. So it was kind of, again, by accident.
Yeah.
And then somehow that turned into kind of my passion for that. Actually I want to keep doing this, even if it's for a year or two before I moved back to London. So I started working for the YMCA there, and kind of went from there, really. So it's very much I didn't seek it out.
So I presume a bit like me, well, so I assume this, but in terms of your knowledge of the YMCA before that sort of backdoor introduction, you had a limited knowledge. Would that be fair to say, or did you knew some stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there's a YMCA where I grew up in Crouch End, so the North London YMCA.
Yeah.
I must have walked past that YMCA a million times.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew the name, and I didn't really know what they did or anything. But I walked past that YMCA a million times, didn't give it a second thought. I think the bus stop is even called,
Oh, really?
the bus stop is called after the YMCA. So every time I was on the bus home, that it would stop at that bus stop and say, it's the YMCA
We're
stop.
here at the YMCA now.
Yeah, exactly. So I had kind of I was quite close to it, but I didn't obviously kind of go in the door and see what was going on, really. Yeah.
I had the same experience. So when we lived in Swansea, just after we were married, I used to drive to, I might have told you this, drive to work past the YMCA in Swansea. And it was that just in the corner of my eye. I had no idea what it was. It was just the building. And then my wife did some exercise classes there for about 6-8 weeks. And I thought, oh, it must be just that kind of thing. That's it.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's funny.
yeah.
Turning to kind of the last sort of 5-6 months in terms of the coronavirus period, and kind of not so much about the YMCA now, but in terms of what have you learnt during the coronavirus period? What has it meant for you on a personal level in terms of your own development?
Yes, I think I always kind of have to remind myself, it's like we're in a global pandemic and everything has become normalized, like a lockdown. It's like I didn't even know what a lockdown was before. So what's really surprised me is how quickly I've adapted to it and accepted it, and actually pretty much everyone, and kind of how resilient we actually are. So if you asked me a year ago, would I be working from home for 7 months and have to be wearing a face mask, I would be panicking. I'd be thinking, it would be impossible. Or how would
Yeah.
I deal with it? But actually, I think, not just myself, but my family, my colleagues at work, everyone's just kind of got on with it really, and I'm quite surprised about that. So I think in terms of learning something, what I've learned about myself, but also everyone else, is how resilient and
Yeah.
kind of adaptable we all are, and
Yeah.
just kind of how tough we all are, because we've kind of just all kind of got on with it.
Yeah.
But if you told us before that, I'm not sure everyone would be, pretty terrified.
Yeah.
If you had a deadly virus spreading around the world,
Yeah.
it's not quite
It's
what you think. Yeah.
even when you said earlier about kind of, we went back to the office and then we said we got sent home. You just kind of go, oh, fine, yeah, so I'm at home now, and you just
Yeah.
it's as easy as that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and actually, in terms of like in my work, our company, like we've all kind of, it's actually been the best period for us, and it's brought everyone together, and kind of everyone's kind of, it's actually helped in a strange way. It's kind of all our bonds have become a little bit stronger as a company. We've kind of adapted much quicker. So yeah, I think it's been kind of amazing just how quickly you can change if you really want to, or if you
Yeah.
need to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So looking at the YMCA over the last sort of 5 months during the Corona period, how do you think the YMCA has moved on during this period?
Yeah, I think it's a similar story in the Y, because I think before coronavirus, we were talking about kind of IT projects. We need to move on with digitization, and it will happen, but we need to kind of do it slowly so people will adjust to it, and people are on board. And we were talking about people still kind of don't feel like part of the group, and
Yeah.
very much their own ways of working. And from what I've seen at board level, and kind of what you've talked about in meetings, and also seeing in terms of the work that we've actually done, it's massive change, and kind of we've all quickly adapted to kind of whatever the new normal, whatever people are calling it.
Yeah.
But in terms of the digitization, everyone's jumping on Teams.
Yeah.
The fact that board meetings kept going, and kind of we kept going through it, and it sounds like we've come closer together.
Yeah.
That's really encouraging, because it's kind of, you could either fall apart and everything can
Yeah.
go terribly, or you can pull together and kind of become better. And it sounds like we've done the latter. So
Yeah.
I'm really proud of kind of what the organization has done kind of during COVID. And there's massive risks of how
Yeah.
social housing, lots of people together, so many bad things could have happened. Could have had massive outbreaks. Other things could have happened. You could have had people with severe mental health issues, and those people feeling isolated. But from what I understand, we've done extremely well to balance everything and adapt. And the kind of the digital youth work is just a really good example of that. I just absolutely love how quickly we were able to do that, and it kind of embodies the things that we're talking about in terms of collaboration, in terms of, so I think we've done a really amazing job in kind of as an organization, and I hope that it kind of continues from here. And kind of the whole kind of, I think we were 4-5-1 kind of strategy.
Yeah.
I hope that one continues to be a
Yeah.
one,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
One of my favourite stories from lockdown was, unbeknownst to me, that the housekeeping team in Wimbledon for many years have been on a rota that puts them on housekeeping from 7 till 11 or 7 till 12 in the morning. And they've said, no, this is what we've always worked. We're not prepared to change.
Yeah.
We clean in the mornings and finish at lunchtime. And then we were saying, it was when Mark took over, he said, well, that means if anybody moves out after 12 o'clock, we can't move someone in until the next day, because the rooms aren't turned around and cleaned. So they've been trying to consult for years to try and move this over, and a slightly union way, they've not been prepared to accept it.
Yeah.
But within a week of saying, actually, we need to switch the rotas, we need to get to A and B rota because we need to increase the cleaning. That changed within a week after 15 years of trying. 1 week of COVID, and it's all now changed, and it won't change back. It's kind of one of those simple things. So
yeah. And I think we're all kind of, it feels like we're all fighting the same enemy.
Yeah.
We're looking at it from like an aggressive standpoint.
Yeah.
but similarly, we kind of all have the same objective, which is to kind of get through this safely, and that really brought people together and kind of harmonized everything, which is really good. And I still think it's kind of incredible for the support staff. My mum works in NHS, and my girlfriend was a kind of a ICU nurse, and they're all on the front line. I don't know how because you're putting yourself at risk, and for them to do that and to keep social housing going, kind of our housing going through that time, that's just amazing to me. So
that's good, brilliant. I'll pass that on actually. So to go back to you then, as a board member, you're both an ambassador and then also someone who's looking at the performance and the strategy. How do you sort of balance the two things about sort of being a face of the organisation as well as being accountable for the organisation?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a tricky question. I guess, yeah, I think the kind of the ambassador role is very much kind of externally facing, and I think I guess what we're trying to do is always highlight the good work that we're doing, but actually on the other side of that, you have to actually make sure that work is being done, right? So I think in terms of a balance, I'm not sure how to phrase it, but it's kind of there's a level of kind of being authentic and genuine in how you are an ambassador, because and then also kind of obviously perform. For me as a newer trustee, I don't know the details of absolutely everything and kind of everything about performance, but actually, as a trustee, ultimately your responsibility is to make sure that the organization is financially viable, that we're following our charitable objectives, and that's kind of central to that. And hopefully the good work of that makes it very easy to become an ambassador, because we're doing good work. So I think it comes from, first of all, having good governance, and hopefully that has good outcomes that you can shout about. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't know if that really answers. It's a bit of. I looked at the question before. I thought that was a bit of a tricky one.
No, I think you've answered really well, and actually, kind of there's a virtual circle there in terms of. Yes, there's the public facing bit of being able to speak positively. Then there's the bit behind closed doors, which is looking at performance. But actually, the two loop together, because then you've got the confidence to speak publicly because you've seen under the bonnet and you've challenged things.
Yeah, and I think there's also kind of people have different roles as trustees as well. So some trustees are much more comfortable kind of in the nitty-gritties of every line of the board papers and the performance and looking at financial accounts. Other trustees are very comfortable kind of supporting any kind of outward-looking work. But I think ultimately to be a trustee, you kind of need to do both well, at least kind of have a good base to do kind of both well. I think is kind of I guess that's the way I try to think about it.
That's great. And then also
on that.
But also the team aspect. So you're doing it as a group of trustees, as opposed to it's not all about you.
It's not all on you to be absolutely everything. Yeah.
Brilliant. What are your what are your hopes for the future for the YMCA supports group in particular?
Yeah, I was looking at the board papers and I saw that we have a company called London Group.
Yes.
Is that like a placeholder in case it's central?
Do you know the history of that? So the history of that. So when East London and South West London merged, the board did some work trying to think about a name, and London Group was a name that they said, oh, we're really good because it kind of brings us together. But there was a bit of a kick-off from some of the other YMCAs in London. So we decided, by that stage we bought the company, so we're going to hold on to the name so nobody else can use it. And then who knows?
I thought it was a bit of I was like, oh, is this a bit cheeky? I'm sure North London and Central will have something to say about this. But it did make me think in terms of, I think there is something about our YMCA being the YMCA for, what is the biggest city in the UK, one of the biggest cities in the world, and that has quite big significance. And I think of kind of other big YMCAs in kind of New York or other places, and I think there's responsibility for us to kind of actually, and Andy talks about this a lot, but we have a big responsibility to kind of develop and kind of share best practice. We have a responsibility to meet the needs, and I think there's needs for young people everywhere. But when I think about London, there was something the other day. It was, a young girl was abducted. A horrible case, and I think it's having grown up in inner city London, I know that there's a great need in kind of these cities and large pockets of deprivation in our cities, and in London specifically. And I think part of the vision is actually, and kind of we've talked about this in reimagination, but my vision would be actually London, St Paul's Group YMCA is really synonymous with supporting young people in London and kind of the regions around London, and we're really core to that youth focus. And I'm thinking about some of the challenges young people in London face, or kind of in the regions around London, and really being central to that. So I think in my vision, kind of that's why it made me think about the London group. It's kind of like the London YMCA that's supporting really in those really needy areas. I was in so I grew up I've moved around London quite a lot, and I lived in Bow for for like 3 years in this tower block, and it was terrible. It was like I mean, you couldn't really use the stairs. There would be like signs where police, like, shootings have happened, and the police are, so it's kind of, I know what it's like to be a young person in London. You're very vulnerable. It's quite scary, and I really wish, when I was like 13 or 14, I had a YMCA to go to, or a youth club to go to, or a gym, and maybe I should have walked into that YMCA. And I think that it's like that we're there for young people in London when they need that support and help. So in my vision, that's kind of what I see.
Fantastic. And actually, as part of the reimagination, my hope is that, I think we are where we are, particularly about St Paul's Group. We are where we are as a result of history. So decisions made by trustees 30, 40, 100 years ago, buying a building or investing in land, and now we're there in Wimbledon and Ealing, wherever else. Actually, maybe it's about sort of planting seeds in other areas, Bow or wherever else, and say it might take years to grow, but this is really important that we are there. So collectively, I think it's really important. The politics is our problem, not the communities.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's thinking about becoming a trustee?
I would say go for it. I think I have a personality where I don't want to do something unless I kind of know I'm going to be good at it. So I think being a trustee was actually a kind of a departure from my normal strategy.
Outside the comfort zone.
And I think that's a really good thing, because actually in the last 2 years I've learned so much. I have a much greater appreciation for YMCA. So I've been a volunteer for the YMCA. I've worked for the YMCA. I've been an ambassador for the YMCA. So I've been involved with the YMCA in a number of capacities, and I think being a trustee is both the most challenging and also I would say the most rewarding, because my impact as a volunteer was very kind of me and these 5 young people in our youth club, or in these 20 kids in this basketball training session. Same thing when I was working, this health project with 50 kids, and I think when you're a trustee, your decisions, the challenge that you might have in a board meeting impacts, we're talking about thousands of young people across London. So it's extremely rewarding and extremely challenging, which only helps you grow as a person. So both in your personal life and professional life, as well as kind of as a volunteer as well. So I would definitely say go for it. It will be something new, so if you've not done it before. But even from day one, if you have been a young person at one point, if you have worked with young people, if you have your own view of the world, that's enough to kind of to deserve to sit there and have an opinion, really.
As you were talking earlier about the basketball, it's suddenly the connection between you playing basketball and sort of connecting in with, and then being connected in with the YMCA in Coventry, to suddenly finding yourself on the other side of the world playing basketball in a car park in Thailand. That massive journey in terms of connection globally as well. You just
and I think my YMCA journey has been, I mean, kind of YMCA is a bit of a cult. It's a little bit like you don't really know like
Yeah,
how you got to this point.
yeah,
And I think it's kind of similarly if you become a trustee, you don't that small decision might impact something else in later
yeah,
life. I think it really does give you a skill set to say, actually, now I can see how this organizations are run, and how that can really be a foundation for you to do amazing things as well. So I think it's an opportunity to help in a different way, but also for you to get a skill set that you can have a greater impact in the future as well, I think.
fantastic. And given, as you said earlier, you've worked for the YMCA in previous roles, incarnations, what would you say to someone who's thinking about coming to work for the YMCA?
Again, I would say YMCA. So there's lots of charities. There's lots of places where you can work, and I think from the outside looking in, the YMCA just seems like another kind of charity, another
Yeah,
organization. But I think we all know that that's not the case, and I think you don't realize that by working in YMCA St. Paul's group, you're actually joining this huge network of like-minded people. I'm talking millions of people around the world that share similar values to you, that give you lots of opportunities to not only meet different people and be connected to different people, but to kind of see different things and have opportunities, to do international work, to be involved in kind of larger projects and other things that I think other charities and organizations just don't have that level of footprint around the world. So I
yeah,
think that's something that's not apparent from you just seeing a job posting for a YMCA. And I think obviously our mission is something that's super relevant now. I mean, every charity has charitable objectives, but I think ours are really at the heart of communities. They're really at the heart of where people need help the most. So I think whatever the person chooses to do, I think will have a kind of a good impact. So I'd say it's I'm kind of rambling now, but the
no,
two
that's
main
great.
points are you're not just joining a YMCA, you're joining the YMCA,
Mhm.
and that comes with a lot more than you think in terms of the organization. And then I think the second part is you're joining a really powerful mission that's really impactful and is actually on the ground. It's not hypothetical. It's not a policy-driven thing. It's actually on the ground. We're reaching these many people, and not many charities are in that position. So
That's fantastic. That's really good. We had Carlos. It was a CEO's call yesterday, and Carlos was joining us, and he was kind of drawing experiences from all over the world and kind of feeding them. So he was in Geneva. We were all over the UK, all over England and Wales. And then you kind of go, people go, oh, that's a great idea. What they were doing in wherever. I'm
yeah,
going to go and take that down to Derby, or I'm going to take
yeah,
it to
exactly.
Bristol, or it was great, that kind of sense of global connect. And not everybody will do the travel piece, but actually the connectivity, you're right, being part of a larger family, a larger movement is great. It's really good.
Yeah.
The final question feels like a bit of a dampener, to be honest. So I will ask it just because it's relevant today. What are the challenges we face in our society, do you think, during and then post-COVID?
God, that's a bit. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, I guess I'm probably a little biased because I'm thinking about my challenges
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
but I think, I was just watching I didn't stay up this time. I normally stay up for the US elections, but I didn't bother because I knew it would be like
It's
it's going
good.
to be resolved in like a month or something.
Yeah.
But I think there is that it's a bit of a cliche now at this point, but kind of that divisiveness,
Yeah.
and people just not being able to talk to each other. And I think even on our Teams calls at work, it's so funny. There's people that are like really anti kind of lockdown and really don't trust the government, and other people that are like, let's just get on with it. And it just seems like people don't really see eye to eye. So I think that's pretty fundamental to like how we've designed our society. So I think that's going to be a challenge, and hopefully, I think whoever brings people together is going to be the biggest impact maker. And that's why I think I'll focus on communities and facilitating people coming together, people coming up with solutions. I think that's quite special because I think that's probably that lack of community and the kind of the
Yeah.
tribalism, the thing that's making everything else that happens worse because
Yeah.
you don't come to an agreement, you don't solve it because
Yeah.
you would rather like it got worse than one person be wrong and one person be right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So hopefully that changes and we have a better 2021.